welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be about acting scared, or acting fearful, or playing fear in films. So today's video is going to be about fear in films, playing fear in films, how we can access fear when filming a role. We're going to just discuss it and see what we come up with. First things first, fear in context. We need to realise that fear in and of itself is generic, and if an actor were just to play scared generically or portray fear, then it would end up being two-dimensional and something that is obviously acted. Now, the goal of an actor is to look like we're not acting. This is a paradox. We want the audience to forget that we're acting. However, the more we try and force looking natural, the more we end up looking like we're acting. Believe me, I know. Therefore, you can't just go in and play scared as a general emotion. It's better to sort of understand fear and realise that fear and the notion of being scared are things that will evolve and change in relation to the context your character is in. There are different types of fear, and you can't just act one blanket definition of fear and apply it to every scenario. But I'm sure you know this. This seems quite logical. Starting out actors, however, tend to fall into this trap, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So this is just a bit of a discussion about how we might go about doing this. Now, I mentioned in a previous video about horror acting that there are different types of fear. For instance, we have lingering terror, nervousness, shock, dread, panic, being wary, being suspicious. Anything you can think of that falls under that umbrella term of fear. So in addition to there being different types of fear, each type of fear in and of itself can be interpreted differently by different characters or roles. For instance, who knows what dread is like definitively, and one character who acts with dread might be different from another character who acts with dread. Everybody's different, everybody interprets things differently, everybody manifests these different feelings differently in their own being and body language, and it's going to be different depending on the character as well. In addition to all this, each actor will have their own personality and will interpret these different definitions of fear in their own way. What's more is these different types of fear will be more or less appropriate than other types of fear depending on the context or the situation within which they are applied. Therefore, it's best to, rather than force one type of generic fear onto a scene, react to the scene itself. Know your character's agenda. For instance, what are they looking for? What do they want? What is their objective? Again, we're talking about Stanislavski's units and objectives here. It's Stanislavski 101. But once you know your character and your context, or the scene, or the situation, or the external circumstances, you will know how your character can act scared in that scene, in that context, in that circumstance. So that was my take on how you act scared in films. I've done some research and I've found some other tips. The first tip is meditate on the horror of the situation. The American Movie Company writes that you may wish to take a few moments before filming a particularly gory scene to meditate on the darkness of what is about to occur. Imagine what it might be like to step onto that set and actually lose your life, or see someone else lose his or her life. Yeah, I guess it's one way of forcing the fear is to really dwell on the situation. It is true, it does work. It's difficult to do. It depends how imaginative you are, really, or it depends how willing you are to get into a dark space. I did it once when I was on a horror film, Coven of Evil, and it did work, actually. But it really helped that we were in the moors, and there was a lot of fake blood, and my character was about to be sacrificed, and I guess it was easy to imagine that happening. I remember thinking, imagine if this was really happening. And it was a freezing cold day, it was windy, I'd marched across the moors. I suppose there was an element of method acting in there because I could put myself in that situation. And in that instance, dwelling on the situation did help. I have to say I did feel the fear. I'm not so sure it shows as much, but I did feel like shit. I remember thinking, this is awful, imagine if you were about to die. And at one point when we were like not rolling, the director was like, are you alright? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just getting into character. I'm about to be sacrificed. Oh man, no, can you imagine getting like I just can't even. Oh god, it was the anticipation of getting your throats. No. So sometimes it's easy to meditate on the horror if you're in a horror film, for instance, or something, and if the effects are good and you can put yourself in that situation and just run with that. But I wouldn't recommend it because acting isn't about traumatising yourself. Another tip I found is really play those calm moments. I've talked about this in a previous video, but one way you can act scared in those jump scare moments is to make yourself super calm, such that when the shocking thing happens, you react involuntarily, in theory. So the idea is to make yourself so calm that when the jump scare happens in the scene, you should in theory react involuntarily and jump or scream or whatever. And to do this, you must not anticipate the shocking thing at all, which would be difficult with multiple takes and if you've read the script. Having said this, relaxing before a shocking thing can be done easily on the set of a horror film, because almost always before a shocking moment there's usually a bit of calm. So if you genuinely relax into the calm every time, the jump moment should, in theory, shock you, because there's that contrast there. If it doesn't, it means you're anticipating it. It's a bit of a tricky thing to do. As viewers, we're on edge during those calm moments because we're anticipating something shocking. As actors, however, we must lean into this calmness and let it envelop us. Do not anticipate the shocking thing. American Movie Company writes that one of the biggest elements of horror films is the shock factor. As an actor, you can learn to use this convention to your advantage. In most horror films, there is a scene that seems relatively benign, or a scene that begins calmly. Don't ignore the importance of this peacefulness. If anything, you should play the calmness to its fullest potential. The calmer you are in the scene, the bigger the payoff will be when the shocking action occurs. It's true. Again, that might be physically stressful for you as an actor because you'll have to actually be shocked. It's not a question of acting anymore if you think about it. It's like, what are you willing to put yourself through? Should I be teaching this? Okay, I've got another tip here for people who want to just act and not really feel the fear necessarily as intensely. This tip is good. I like this a lot. Play the opposite. Act brave. In moments of intense emotion, aspiring actors wallow in it. They give themselves to the emotion that they think they should portray, even though it's not realistic to do that. And by intense emotion, I mean anything where things get a bit more dramatic, such as crying, arguing, feeling anger or rage, laughing, elation, terror, heartbreak, and so on. In moments of such intense emotion, it is actually more realistic to play away from it. In other words, play the opposite. This is because this is what people do in real life, if you think about it. When people are terrified, especially in horror films, they don't act scared, they act brave. They're like, well, I've got a clip of me creeping around a haunted house. It's brave to do that if you're scared. It's brave to creep round corners and think, what the hell is there? Even though you're scared, and it looks like you're scared. But in reality, you're not actually playing pure fear, are you? You're fighting it. And I think that's where the interesting battle comes in, of the feelings and emotion. And if you think of horror films, they do this. Next tip is called substitution. Often in horror films, characters are running from ghosts and monsters and all sorts of weird things that most likely don't exist in real life. So how then is an actor supposed to portray these things realistically if they've never seen them or if these things don't even exist? Well, this is where substitution comes in. It is a useful technique if you're having trouble relating to your character's circumstances. This is where you substitute your character's situation to a similar one that you have actually lived through. For instance, maybe you're playing a character who is terrified of a ghost. And you've never seen a ghost or this ghost, and you can't imagine it. But maybe you can think of a time where you were terrified of something, maybe a massive spider, and then you can mentally superimpose that feeling of fear for the spider onto your character who is feeling that fear for a ghost. That's just an example. It's difficult to do, really. Like I said in another video, I did try and imagine a spider, and no matter how hard I did, it always looked cute, and that's not the effect I was going for. Uta Hagen writes about substitution in Respect for Acting. On page 32, she writes, I use substitution in order to make believe in its literal sense, to make me believe, in order to send me into the moment-to-moment spontaneous action of my newly selected self on stage. Now, major disclaimer, Hagen adds that she does not want anyone doing this at the expense of their sanity. Acting should not be traumatic. So do not think of something that actually has terrified you and is still something that you have to relive and endure and work through. No, these have to be resolved things that you are substituting into the scene. Do not traumatise yourself. Acting is hard work and it is a skill. It is not about torturing yourself. Next tip, the physical. You can also work with the physical body itself to get psyched up for that horror scene. This may or may not work for everyone. There is a theory that you can physically trick your body into behaving in a certain way, physically. Then your feelings will change in relation to that physical behaviour. For instance, if you start hyperventilating and shaking, there's a theory that you will end up feeling nervous and scared. Like if you start like twitching and stuff, maybe your feelings will follow the physical emotion as opposed to the other way around. Which comes first, the physical or the mental? And some people think they can trick the mental to come if they move the physical about. The website Thrillist interviewed actress Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who said she liked to exert energy before going into gasp mode. Acting scared is a lot about energizing. I tend to do a lot of silly physical things to try to get there. I feel like if I can trick my body into thinking this is real, then it kind of helps the emotions. I do a lot of, causing myself to hyperventilate. It's a lot of running in place and push-ups. If I don't have a lot of space, I'll get my body in a really weird position and hold my breath for a long time. I probably look insane, but it's a trick as opposed to just being super organic, coming at it emotionally, which is really hard. I think fear is one of the hardest things to manifest out of nothing. You kind of have to do some little tricks sometimes. So, if your body thinks it's scared, you'll feel scared. Or at least look scared. Again, take caution. Acting isn't about traumatising yourself, so work with what you find comfortable. And that's me with this video summing up. So thanks for watching. This has just been a bit about how to act scared in films. I looked at how to approach it mentally and physically, and we looked at how to feel genuine fear or trick your mind into feeling fear that might not be there. And also my favourite, play the opposite, which is quite a nifty trick. Not all of these tricks will work for everyone, so it's up to you to find what works for you. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, then feel free to leave them down below and I'll try and get back to you. Anyway, bye for now.